Coach Jay,
Yeah.
I saw you yesterday rolling that thing.
That was different.
That rolling.
I had to take it back to Chad.
No, it was Jalen Perry.
Okay, it's one of the
Again, get that dot plot down. Actually, I'm going to do this.
Okay,
For those of you that are missing, let's do this.
3.5.
Alright, get this down. Here we go.
1.8. It's right there. I got a 1 point there.
Well, yeah, Miami is the first school. But he didn't.
Wait.
It is embarrassing.
I think we did.
Coach Jay,
Yo, what's up, Chris?
what is better schools, University of Miami or Georgia?
University of Miami every day.
Thank you.
Academically.
No way. No way. Miami.
Yeah, Georgia's better than Miami. Sixth in the nation. Georgia's better than Miami.
No, God, no, you're so wrong.
What are
That's
you?
what everyone's wrong. They are number one for
Miami is like what you
Michael.
There is no.
Georgia's getting. Okay, you know what?
That's because they have
I'm gonna
high
research
people.
this.
Georgia's gonna be the next university.
Uh-oh. No, that's not it, Chris.
Everybody's gonna go to Georgia.
Miami's hard.
Georgia's not
That's the Harvard.
This is a run.
My dad
Georgia is
is
a public university. It's 20 years.
Oh,
She did this!
It was your fault.
Oh my word! Does anyone want one?
This is what I'm
They're spray
talking
painted.
about.
They're spray painted.
I have to take a picture of this moment.
Hey, don't tell any other classes.
I'll never make fire.
They're
never
We did one.
Oh, we did.
Alright, here we go.
Wait, can I take a picture of this moment?
You can take a seat. No. Are they good? It takes. They're really hard, aren't they?
Georgia's
Oh,
that
yeah,
good.
no, you got
Yes,
They did it there for like a year.
Yeah, it's a little bit higher.
What is a spray
Miami
ball?
was 53
Yeah,
46.
no, it's just like normal spray.
Okay. Miami is the best.
Alright, here we go. Alright, eyes up here, eyes up here. Okay, before we get to the golden nugget, this is really important, okay? So I know we're having fun today with everyone getting a golden gumball. Didn't intend that, that's okay. Here's the important part. What we're about ready to say is like, you gotta know, okay? You gotta know. This is bigger than just this chapter as well. So that's why this is so important. If you were to write the dot plot, if you did a rough estimate like this, that would be sufficient, okay? It just needs to be something that looks like what's up here.
That one or that one?
I would write, this is the one I'm going to use. So just as a heads up, this is where I'm going, okay? Now, let's just discuss this, and then we're going to go through numbers 4 into 5 and 6, okay? All right, so let's talk about this. This is important. Really dial in. The question that I have is this. Did the caffeine increase in heart rate? The sample mean was 1.2, right? This was from our sample. Did that occur purely by chance? Or do you feel like this is something that we can say is statistically significant? Give me a response, and then maybe your why. It's a tough question. It's a tough question. Shane, go ahead.
I think it could have possibly happened purely by chance because the data is pretty equal on either side of 0.
So it's equal on equal sides here?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good thought. It's a good thought. Any other thoughts here? Lindsay?
I'd say by chance because the data, there's a majority of the data is to the left of it, and there's like very little data at 1.2 or above. So it seems like most of the data is to the left. Much lower.
Okay, this is good. Sarah?
I don't think it's like significant because where it is clustered, like the highest you'll get is like maybe 2 responses on a certain area,
Yeah.
and it's so spread out that don't know, it just doesn't look statistically significant.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Any other thoughts? Shane, you got something else?
Plus, like what we did, we don't know if we just kind of randomly chose numbers and then threw them down.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like right.
Yeah.
Like,
So
we didn't actually perform a test.
yeah, that's good. Here's the question. This is where you gotta really kind of think, and I want you to connect with this. This is like our golden nugget for the day in essence. Okay. All right. So when we backtrack, we got data, right? Our sample mean was a difference of 1.2 in the positive direction, meaning caffeine was 1.2 higher on average than non-caffeine. Okay, got to really stick to this point here. You ready? If that is true, we assumed that this was random. You follow me? You say, Coach, how did we assume that it was random? By what Shane just said, by the way that we just said random, we randomly assigned 10 one way, 10 another. And if it really wasn't significant, then we would say that the sample that we did at the beginning of this was also random as well. So we assumed that this 1.2 was random. So what did we do? We took all 20 of them, randomly assigned 10 one way, 10 another, and then we just said, okay, what was the difference in means from a random standpoint, right? Assuming that it was random. Now here's where you got to really stick, right here. This is the golden nugget. I would get this down. 1.2 was our sample mean, right? The question that I have is, if we did this assuming that it was random, what percentage of the dots fell on 1.2 or greater than 1.2? Assuming this occurred by chance. Right here, okay? Again, and it's important, here's something to note too, next to that dot plot when you're writing this down. We also want to make sure we include 1.2. Include the dots on 1.2 of whatever my sample mean was, okay? So we're not saying that's greater, we're saying 1.2 or greater. So out of the total dots, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, out of 24 total, which was my sample size, when we end up simulating this, the number of values that was 1.2 or greater was 3 out of 24. Good. So 3 over 24. This is actually coming back to the first activity we ever did. You remember this? The discrimination one? Okay. Very similar. What's 21 divided by 24? Someone throw that down.
0.875.
0.875. Good. What is this percentage? 0.125. Okay. All right, so I want you to put that down. So 12.5% fell on 1.2 or greater than 1.2, and 87.5% was less than. Does that change what you think on the bottom question? Or does it not change what you think? By show of hands, how many of you think that yes, it occurred purely by chance? Just raise your hand. Let's vote this thing.
I see.
Okay? So if you can't prove it one way or another, you would say that it probably happened purely by chance. Would you assume that? That's what, if you're in between, go to that, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. How many of you say no? How many of you say no? I had 9 people vote. Seriously? Seriously? Whoa! It's not for great. Not for great. All right, be confident. Oh my word. How many of you say no? That it didn't occur by chance. 2, 3, 4.
Jaden, you can't vote twice.
Yeah, what are you doing?
All right, go.
Take it away.
I'm done with that. All right, so here's what you got to know. Okay. The next part we're going to go to is this. Before I go into what the actual answer is, the percentage we've got. Now let's look at this. Down below, what does each dot represent? That's important. Okay, so I'm going to write that up here so you can see it. What does each dot represent before we get into the analysis part? Jade?
Everyone in the class is like sample mean.
Yes, what's one dot? You're right. What's this dot
One
represent?
person in the class is sample mean.
Perfect. And the sample mean is the difference between what?
The average mean in caffeine and no caffeine.
One person sample mean concerning the difference between what?
A randomized sample of caffeine.
Concerning the difference of caffeine mean, heart rate, and non-caffeine. Good job, Michael. And non-caffeine. Good. Okay, that's what one dot means. That's important. You got to know that. Okay. All right, last two questions, and we got golden nugget, and we're good. That's good stuff. All right, the next one is this: interpret the percentage. Now, here's where we're really going into this. The most important thing in AP Statistics. This unit's huge. Okay, I keep saying that it's huge. Question 5 and 6 is really going into it. Okay, Brianna?
Could you go back for like a second?
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay. The next one.
Coach, you do that over there too.
What did I do?
On the dot plot, did the caffeine increase?
Oh, I did.
It's
I don't know how to
okay.
spell caffeine.
I always struggle with that. Is it funny? Oh.
Whoa! Whoa!
Everybody was laughing. Only y'all three were laughing. I was
Okay, we're good?
I don't know why.
We're good. Interpret this percentage. These two right here, dial in, and then we're good. Okay? Interpret this percentage. Here we go. We assuming, what did we assume?
You know what they say about assuming?
That it was random.
Yep, the caffeine has no effect, or that was random, right? So assuming that caffeine has no effect on heart rate, we have a what percent chance?
3/24.
3/24, which in this case would be?
0.125.
Yeah, so 12.5% chance of, make sure you get it perfect, getting a difference of what? Yep, difference of 1.2 or higher. Nice. Or higher. Did I say heart rate yet? Oh, yeah, and then I like this. This is the next part. Higher purely by chance. Okay? You got to know this. You just got to know it. This is huge. This is big. You got to really know it. Assuming that this has no effect on heart rate, we have a 12.5% chance of giving a difference of 1.2 or higher purely by chance. Question: can I assume cause and effect here? If it was statistically significant. Why? 3 tickets if you know. Okay? How did I do the study that made it to where I could use cause and effect, Chris? Random what? Random assignment. Good. Put some in caffeine, some in non-caffeine. The question is this statistically significant? That's where we go to question 6, okay? So we assume this to be have no effect. We have a 12.5% chance of getting a difference of 1.2 purely by chance. So here we go. There's 2 possibilities. You ready? Possibility 1, possibility 2. We're wrapping up with this, okay? If the percent, what percent? This percent, okay? Is higher than 5%. Why 5%? 5% is traditionally, anything lower than 5%, we say that it is statistically significant, and we would say that it's unlikely to happen by chance. Could it still? Yes, but we say it's unlikely. Therefore, we could state cause and effect. But if it is greater than 5%, in this case 12.5, we would say that in this case, we do not have convincing evidence to say that caffeine causes an increase in heart rate. Does that make sense?
Why is 5%?
Good question. It changes, right? It changes, but traditionally in statistics, they say 5%. Anything less than 5%, we say that we have convincing evidence. But if it's anything greater than, we just say we do not have convincing evidence to state it. Could it still be that it causes? Yes, it could. We just, in this instance, do not have convincing evidence to say it. Okay? Does that make sense?
If we did more dots, then we could find convincing.
Bingo. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? Y'all with me? I feel like we're not with me right now. This is big. With that, we've got to make sure you understand higher amounts of dots, higher sample size would allow us to have greater what? We'd be able to say with more confidence, yeah, it'd be statistically more significant. Sarah, were you saying something?
Validity.
Yeah, that's actually true. The validity would increase, right? As the sample size increased as well. Y'all had good thoughts. Good stuff. Cool. You said something good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if the percent is higher than 5%, we do what? We do not have convincing evidence to ... What do we not have convincing evidence to say?
That is positive, it is.
Statistically.
We do not have convincing evidence to say that caffeine causes increased heart rate, right? So what we would say is we would just say the percentage, 12.5%, is higher than 5%, therefore we do not have convincing evidence to say that caffeine causes an increase in heart rate. If the percentage is what?
Higher than 5%.
Well, now it's less than, less than 5%. We would say what?
We do.
Can conclude.
We do have
Not dropping highlights.
convincing evidence.
People know your grades.
Say that it's
Guys, make sure you're here with us. We do have convincing evidence to say what?
that it's statistically significant.
Yep, whatever our context is, to say that the caffeine, in fact, does cause an increase in heart rate. Okay?
Wait, so higher than 5% it's not statistically significant?
We say we do not have convincing evidence to say that it's statistically significant. Could it still be? Yes, we just don't have enough evidence to prove it. But if it's less than 5%, that's where we say we do have convincing evidence to, and then we go into the cause and effect in that way, right? If it's greater than, we say that it's not likely, right? This is not likely, and that's the big thing that we're focused on. Okay? Question, Lindsay?
So when we're looking at stuff like this, like the percentage that we compare to 5%, what is that gonna be like? We're looking at the value and then what?
In this case, depending on the situation, right? Anything from 1.2 to greater shows that caffeine causes what? An increase in heart rate, right? So we just did this purely by chance. We assume we just did it by chance. If this was, let's say, here's a good one. What if we got the original one? We got the mean to be 2.0. That's way out here. That means that anything to the right of that would be less than 5%, which would allow us to say that we do have convincing evidence to say that caffeine does in fact increase heart rate. You see the difference there? The 5% allows us to, anything less than that allows us to infer cause and effect, right? Cool. All right, here we go. Last thing. Golden nugget, let's do it. Let's go. Get this down. I've already got it down. That's good. Okay, I'll talk about it as you're writing it down. Sampling variability. 1042, just making sure we're good. Yeah, we're good. We're gold. Sampling variability, couple things. Different samples yield different estimates, right? If we did this differently, let's say we did it again, is it possible we could have enough evidence to say that it's statistically significant? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why Shane, what he said was perfect. Increase the sample size, and that will allow us to maybe have a better idea or a better estimate of whether it really is statistically significant or not statistically significant. Number 2, larger samples produce a more accurate estimate. To Shane's point. Cool. Did I give you a ticket for that, by the way?
Yes.
I did? Okay, good. Also, the margin of error. This is big too. We'll come to this again at a later time in another chapter. But this creates an interval of plausible values. So how do I do that? I take my estimate and I just add and subtract my margin of error. We will look more into this, but just know that it's my sample, in this case 1.2, plus or minus whatever they give me the margin of error is. Okay, they'll give both of these to you to this point. Okay, my sample mean though difference was 1.2, and then my margin of error they would give that to you at a later time. Okay, just kind of know that back there.
Are we old enough?
Not old enough yet. Yeah, still not old enough. I thought about it, but then I was like, go to your room type of thing, you know, and I'm joking. Just joking. All right, statistically significant. That is when results from a study are too unusual to have occurred purely by chance. That's the less than 5%, okay? So if you want to make that note, anytime we say something statistically significant, we say that is less than 5%. Cool? Okay? So if you have all of these dots here, this is a good example. If the circle dots are less than 5%, then we would say that in this instance, that is statistically significant. Is it always the right side that we circle or we're focused on? No, depending on the context, it could be also less than. Either side. Cool? Either side. And again, you'll see it, proportion of dots, if they're less than 5%, it's statistically significant. If the proportion of dots are less than 5%, we say it's not statistically significant, therefore we cannot conclude cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. Now this cause and effect can only occur when what happens in my study? Random assignment. Y'all are getting it. Y'all are getting it. If I take a random sample, can I say statistically significant?
Yes. If it is less than 5%.
I did a little tweak on that, Sarah. If it randomly assigned. Now, just a regular random sample might be just observational, which then I can only say correlation. Does that make sense? So the random assignment to make it an experimental is the key. Cool? All right. Good stuff. It's good. I love this. I don't know. I just love this stuff. Statistically significant. All right, questions on this? Do y'all feel Gucci?
Oh, proportion.
Proportion of dots are less than or equal to 5% or greater than. And again, this is my sample here. Okay. All right, so I've got something to share with y'all. I've got a fresh rap that's coming out. Are y'all game for that? Are y'all game for this? So I don't have very many for AP Stat because I made this one up. I've got my chain. I need a chain for AP Stat. This one's my only one. You should be scared. You should be scared. I dedicate this to Jaden.
Oh no, the voice is coming out.
All right, so
Nicki Minaj is coming.
it is totally. There is no soundtrack to it, so if you want to, give me a soundtrack later on. We'll be doing it. All right, you ready? Here we go. Release this Friday. No, next Friday. $1.29 iTunes. Here we go. Here's the chorus. We are AP Stat. We are AP Stat. We're taking random samples, doing studies like that. We are AP Stat. We are AP Stat. Oh, look, Coach J is smaller than a wombat. Oh, we are AP Stat. We are AP Stat. Inference is our study from a random assignment. We are AP Stat. We are AP Stat. Making fives on our tests from the help of podcast. Hey team, throw your sigmas in the air, knowing how far that we've come. No class ever can compare. From mean to spread and to normal distribution, no camaraderie on our teams like one single institution. Docs and stocks help us describe FRQs. AP tests better bring an extra box of tissues. Correlation focuses on denoting variables. Once we find X and Y, A's become inevitable. There's just one other thing to remember in our path. The empirical rule includes 68, 95, and 99% of the data between 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations away. 1, 2, 3, on to chapter 4, learning stats from a rap where I dance on the floor. You've got random samples drawn from a population with an SRS AP stat can instigate causation. Dividing things in strata sets me apart based on a group. Stay away from bias so your statistics don't get duped. Cluster mirrors the whole into smaller sections. I'm way off now, that's okay. That's all good. Just be sure to remember to finesse your test. Your success is your best and pursuit becomes obsessive. We are AP Stat, we are AP Stat, we are random samples doing studies like that. We are AP Stat, we are AP Stat. Oh, Coach J is smaller than a wombat. We are AP Stat, we are AP Stat. Experiencing in our studies from a random assignment. We are AP Stat, we are AP Stat. Making fives on our tasks from the help of podcasts. That's all I got.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. It's gonna be released. There's a couple of tweaks that we got. But that was it right there. Very good.
That was beautiful.
I don't even know where to go from there, other than Wait, we need this thing.
We need her to critique. Are you on SoundCloud?
SoundCloud is coming. It's coming. Me and Eric.
Straight to iTunes.
I heard Eric's got some releases too.
Wow.
I told him. He told me to play his songs with my to my daughter. He said, "Can I do that?"
I haven't listened to them. I don't know.
People say don't do that. That's why I said that. They say don't do that. But hey, we do have. I want to do the hot seat. Can we do the hot seat? Y'all good with that? It's Friday before fall break.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the hot seat. So let's do this. Who do we got today? We'll pull it out. Does anyone want to do the hot seat? Let's ask that first. Does anyone not want to do the hot seat? That's probably good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hot seat? I'm scared.
It's
I'm
not that hot.
scared.
No, go ahead. Sit down.
It's
It's okay.
It's good temperature.
Yay, he's in the hot seat.
I think I'm scared. I mean, let's do someone else. I mean,
Let's do someone that's really fun. So
Let's
not
attack
Jaden
them.
and
all right, who's
Yeah, let's
next?
go fight.
I'll tell you who's next right now. Chris, have we done it yet?
Yeah.
We did. Okay, so I had to flip the next one.
Chris again.
Literally the other Chris. Oh, wow. Chris is up. Let's go. All right, we're gonna see if he's telling the truth. All right, here we go. This is his right here. All right, questions. We'll start with the first one, traditional one. You know, desert island. 3 things or people. Who or what would you bring?
My brother. My Xbox. TV. Play the Xbox.
Fair. Favorite game?
Madden.
Nah, gotcha. What team do you taking right now?
Right now, I've adopted a new team in the Chiefs.
Ooh, okay, gotcha. Are you playing on it? Have you put yourself or your brother on it?
Oh no,
No.
don't do that. That's cheating.
Okay, gotcha. Fair. Questions, throw them out there.
Any questions?
what's your favorite color?
Red.
Favorite food?
I
get to.
say that.
Chicken wings.
If you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Michigan.
How old were you when you first played football?
8.
8?
Did you know you were gonna be a star?
Honestly, no.
Have you always been tall, or did you have like
Yes.
a random growth spurt?
You know, seriously, I did. I didn't think I was. I thought it was gonna be.
grade, you were 6 foot.
Honestly, I didn't know like how good I was. Like, I didn't know like how good I could be in football until like freshman year, like when Coach Hall walked in. And then I was like, wait, like I can actually play like college football, right?
Yeah.
It was always a dream, but like when then he came, it like made it reality.
Did you freak out when it came?
Yeah. I didn't freak out, but like in my head, I was like really excited.
That's cool.
Are you gonna pick up ice hockey now that you're gonna be in Michigan?
Never. I'm gonna go to the game though. Hockey games are fun.
What is it?
Pets?
Two dogs.
What are their names?
Simba and Ali.
What type of dogs are they?
Labs.
Lab. Okay. Gotcha. Cool.
What color?
One's like goldish and then one's more like brown.
What's one goal for this year? I'm just looking at your list here.
Like school wise?
Yeah, just overall. Could be football, could be school-wise, whatever. You put it down. You put down graduate.
Oh
That's what you
yeah.
put down.
Yeah.
Down graduate.
That's a good goal.
If you could eat anywhere right now, anywhere, anything you want, what would you
Cookout.
cook out? What would you get?
Excuse me?
I don't like
I'll get 2 burgers, fries, and a milkshake.
Yes.
Which one?
That's pretty. It's pretty cheap too.
Yeah,
$5.
All that food for cheap. I'll either get like.
It's a good day spot, fellas. I'm telling you.
Yes. Or
Speaking of date spots, you got to go to.
No, I'm focused on my athletics and academics.
Fair enough. That's
So I
cool.
don't really
Yeah.
spend time with females.
Any
What's your
other
least
questions?
favorite class?
No, it's actually English.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it hard?
No.
No,
it's just
it's the
annoying.
teacher.
There's no need to learn what we're learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk to 'em.
Like what?
I'm
When
scared.
we use Anglo
Denton's the
Saxon.
goat. The goat.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
You should switch.
Our whole class wants
Am
to
I
switch.
good? Am I good?
You're good to go. Off the hot seat, Chris. Nicely done, man. All right, so we've got right now. That's Tom. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Hey, have a great day. We'll see y'all.
Brianna.
What'd
you
Yeah.
say? Awesome. Would you mind putting that on one side?
Brianna,
Oh.
Left side underneath the criteria. Do that, and we'll go through that. Okay.
So Jay, I have a basic homework assignment. Okay.
What time? What one was it?
Probably.
I'll go do it. Depending on how far it was, I'll just so I'm consistent. I can't give you full credit.
Oh yeah, I know that. I know that. All right, cool. Sounds good.
Hey, also with the within class and stuff, I noticed you haven't been taking notes a lot.
Oh yeah.
Is that how you operate? Yeah. I just want to make sure you're still focused in. Cool. All right. Good luck tonight. I know tonight's the big one, right?
It's supposed to be.
Oh my god.
Is that supposedly like